Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the July My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. In the July kit, we got an incredibly gorgeous collection from Prima called Postcards from Paradise. I had a lot of fun using this collection. The colors are just so gorgeous and so tropical. I started off by using the pattern papers and some of the pocket cards to back a cut file from Pear Tree Cut Files. This is one of the cut files that all My Creative Scrapbook subscribers have access to. There are several each month. Because I plan on stitching on the cut file after I backed it, I cut out another outline of the entire cut file to go behind it, and I glue that behind it. This helps me with the stitching process. It gives me a little bit more of a sturdy surface to stitch on. I allow that to dry, and now I'm working on my background. I'm using this whole 12 by 12 inch sheet from the kit this month. I'm using a craft knife and a metal ruler, and I am cutting along the lines in the background. I just love this wood grain paper. I thought it would look nice if it was a little distressed. I like to use a metal ruler. I think the secret to making cuts on pattern paper like this is to very gently score along whatever line you're making first, and then go back and press a little bit harder and a little bit harder. I sometimes find if I press too hard initially, the knife will go in a different direction than I wanted to. So that's my method of using a craft knife on pattern paper. After I had made the cuts where I wanted them, and notice I didn't go all the way up to the edge, although you certainly could because you have the rest of the paper to hold the cuts together. But I took the edge of the blade and I distressed the edge of the paper on both sides of each of the cuts. I know that a lot of these cuts are going to be covered by the cut file and the embellishments, so I'm trying to make sure that I have a number of cuts at the very top and the very bottom, because I know that those areas will still be visible when I add my cut file. To round out the distressing, I made a few cuts in areas that I thought made sense, but there weren't necessarily lines to guide me. Once I had made my cuts and then distressed the edges, I went in and did a little bit more distressing by folding the paper. I think it was the extra distressing that really helped this paper tearing technique, I guess you could call it, to be noticeable. As I'm further distressing the paper, my eye is drawn to certain spots that I think would look nice if they had a little bit of distressing. So I'm just kind of going with my gut and making some cuts in a couple of different areas. In the final layout, I really like the contrast between the bright, clean look of the papers and this distressed background. I think it makes a nice combination. At this point, my cut file is complete. I did some stitching on it, as I said. I mainly used the back stitch, but to surround the word happy, I used what's called the chain stitch. I thought that since that stitch is a little heavier than the back stitch, it would draw a little bit more attention to the letters in the title. I also used a brighter color thread on the letters that spell out the title Happy. I thought that would also add a little bit more focus on the title. To add a little more emphasis to those cuts in the background, I'm using some Distress ink and a dauber, and I'm inking the edges of all of them. In a couple of spots, I got some ink on the background along the edge of the lines, and I wasn't trying to do that, but I think it ended up looking good. I like the way that it kind of added to that wood grain effect. I didn't want to saturate the background with ink. In some areas, the inking's a little lighter than others, and in some spots, there isn't any inking. I think that that variation helps to add to the interest in the background. I selected a number of die cuts and fussy cut pieces and some flowers from one of the flower packs, and I am using some picked raspberry distress oxide, and I'm inking the edges of all of them. There's a distress oxide color called Kitsch Flamingo. I thought that would be a good color, but it turned out when I compared colors, the picked raspberry went a little bit better with this collection. I have two small square photos that I'm going to use on this layout. I cut some squares out of pattern paper and I'm inking the edges. These are going to be mats for my photos. I always like to bring some of the colors from the layout to the photos. Otherwise, I think that all the elements don't look like they go together. And a photo mat of pattern paper is a really easy way to do this. I was considering putting a bright color behind the layout, and you'd be able to see the color through those openings that I cut. But then I was thinking there's a lot of color on this layout, and I thought I would go with a more subtle look. So I attached that pattern paper to just a plain piece of white paper. I used a piece of 80-pound cardstock. I am mounting my photos on those photo mats that I cut out earlier. These photos measure 2 5/8 by 2 5/8. I printed them on a Canon Selfie, and then I used some square stitch dies to cut them out. So if you look carefully at the photos, you could see the indent of stitching around the outside. I used some ATG adhesive to attach my cut file down to the background. I didn't use wet glue because I know that I often move cut files around. Once I have my pictures arranged and I start adding the embellishments, I sometimes want to make small adjustments to the placement. So I always start off with a temporary adhesive. And then if I don't feel like it'll hold up in the long run, I'll add some wet glue when I'm all done with the layout. I thought that these were some cute photos of flamingos. My daughter took them when she was on vacation in the Dominican Republic last spring. I guess the flamingos were right there on the resort. She took some photos of them and also some videos on her phone. So I watched the videos and I took a couple of screenshots. So I'm not sure which photos these are, but I was able to get a couple of extra pictures out of the video. I fussy cut these flowers out of pattern paper, so I included one of those flowers in each of the corners. I noticed that the cut I made under the letter H wasn't really noticeable, so I used my scissors, made it a little bit bigger, bent the cut a little bit, and then I used some distress ink and I added some color to it. I made some small adjustments to the position of those pictures a couple of times. I wanted to get the angle just right. I wanted to be able to see as much of the flamingos as possible, but I also wanted them to be angled in a way that I thought looked nice on the layout. And you can see here, I'm pulling that cut file down a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more space for the photos. I'm adding the pink flowers that I had inked the edges of earlier. I had a theme this month of having a diagonal configuration to my embellishments. I didn't really realize it until after I looked at all of my layouts, how I use that diagonal from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner on a lot of my layouts. It's just kind of a go-to for me. So you could see that those flowers follow that same diagonal line. I fussy cut a number of these broad tropical looking leaves from the pattern papers. I spread them around the layout in a couple of different areas. I'm happy with the way the embellishments look, so I start to attach them down to the layout. I'm using ATG adhesive. I think it's perfect for someone like me who, as I had mentioned, really likes to move things around on their layouts. It doesn't always come up cleanly, but most of the time it does, and it allows me to create without worrying that I won't be able to make adjustments. I noticed that some scrapbookers work with wet glue and they glue things down very confidently. I wish I could be a little bit more like that, but I like to try things out in different places. Every once in a while, I'll feel a little brave and I will attach something down with wet glue. And I would say that 9 times out of 10, I regret that. It's just the way my brain works. I like to try different things in different areas, and I talk about this all the time. I often like to go back the next day, take a fresh look at something. A lot of times the next day, something I really couldn't see the day before will become very clear to me, and I will want to change things around. So that's my approach. I did feel confident about attaching down these gorgeous dimensional flowers. I love all of these flowers, but I just thought that this particular pack was so beautiful with the gold centers and the different shades of pink. So I attached down a larger flower and then a couple of smaller flowers in each cluster. For that, I used some gel medium. I added some photo corners to my 2 photos. I just added one to each photo. I punched some green paper out using my EK Success scalloped photo corner punch. I inked the edges with whatever green color was on my green dauber. I attached those down to the photos, and then I added a very tiny jewel to both photo corners. I fussy cut out another one of those tropical leaves, and I put it at the bottom of the cut file. And then I was thinking that those flower clusters could look a little fuller, so I got another one of the larger size flowers from that pack of flowers, and I added another one to each of those 2 clusters. And then I once again got out my gel medium and attached them down. I think that those additional flowers really helped to define those flower clusters. Before, I think they were just a little bit too small. Luckily, gel medium takes a little bit of time to dry, so I was able to make those adjustments without having to rip any of those flowers off of the background. That was the very last touch that I add to this layout. The layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch. I hope that you enjoyed it or perhaps got an idea or a little inspiration out of it. Please look in the description box. You'll find the link to the My Creative Scrapbook website and also to all of their social media. You can get lots of inspiration and order a kit if you would like. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Take care, everybody. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.